The wound of non-recognition is a really vast topic and theme of our experience here. It's one of the main ways how, the control systems are trying to bring us down and keep us entrapped in powerlessness and a very fake, false image about ourselves as well. And it's my understanding that the wound of rejection is also directly linked to the wound of non-recognition. The border between the two of them can be a bit blurry and not entirely clear. And you know how this system always try to use entry points to access us based on pre-existing wounding that has been generally installed by MK Ultra, programs that psychologically break us down, install a lot of distorted belief, negative belief, and backdoor programming, and a lot of self-deceit as well, internally programmed, which is a reason why it is so challenging to find the rare ones who are engaging in true deprogramming here. Because you can loop in circles for years and years and repeat things that are half satisfactory, but that are not really what you have in mind. I mean, the secret is that you don't need anybody to manifest and realize what you have in mind. But sometimes it is nice to have another person to co-create with. And if you are committed to radical deprogramming, these beings might be rare to find. And you might collide with the MK Ultra structures in others. And you are oftentimes the most deprogrammed person within a group is the most targeted one by covert aspect in others. And this target is often, the system tries to isolate you. That's what it does, and to activate isolation and separation programming as well. Through angles and visions that others don't understand and have shortcomings about. But then you have to see how do they react, because very rarely people are truly open to feedback, and are very rarely they are asking for feedback or open to it. And sometimes they believe they are, but in the signature you can read that what they are going to already do with that feedback, so you don't even want to try. You already know where it leads, and it's draining, exhausting, and not leading anywhere. You've been there before. You just don't want to sign there once again, right? So there are major wounds that are installed by MK Ultra, which is majorly to break our self-esteem and keep it in the lower frequency ranges, right? And they embed everything. They embed a lot of programming together, like, how sacrifice and savior complex and blind compassion are always intertwined, and, embedded as programs with layers of abuse, and that explains why we stay sometimes longer than necessary in really abusive situations, sometimes not even realizing how abusive they are, or trying to look for shadows that we don't have. I mean, we need to be working on our shadows, that's for sure, but not on the shadows that we don't have. And working on our shadows is mainly about mastering the dissociation, So when we are dissociating because of suffering and experiencing pain, we want to gain mastery, not to go in reactive programs, and reactive behaviors, reactive choices that are so predictable. That's why they write books about narcissists and, all the patterns and toxic triangulations and all these things, because it's always textbook, because it's so programmed. But narcissistic aspects are programmed within every original spark here. And when you're triggered in your SSP super soldier programming, when you are dissociating, that's the moment where you have to gain mastery. So you're not on automatic rail, becoming a handler for other, playing the role of handlers, persecuting them, blaming others. And that's the reality here, we've been lacking appreciation, validation, and recognition throughout our life, especially during the first decades, through childhood, at school, in very handled family environment, where you're targeted and ambushed. At school, you also can be easily made a target. Teachers can be leaguing, becoming a league against you. You have a lot of handlers around. The occasional gang stalker here and there that always insert like quite unpleasant thing. So there is a lot we have been dealing with. And this journey is about rebuilding this sense of appreciation for ourselves, this sense of validation for ourselves, and this sense of recognition from ourselves. The only place where it's solid is when it's within. When you have it, you can self-witness yourself, you can self-validate, you can self-recognize yourself. So you're less dependent on needing that coming from any external source that can be robbed away from you at any moment. That's the strongest and the only solid place is within. And our relationships here are challenging due to MK Ultra aspects, especially when people are getting triggered. The way they react is really important. And when relationships are being challenged, we can experience different things like rejection, preprogrammed abandonment, sometimes also righteous anger, right? And that's an energy that's gonna make you move and change things in your life as well, where you're gonna stand more in your own power and stand up for yourself. Now, in our reality, every day there is always a degree of projections involved, projection of unhealed aspects and core wounds. And for that, working with quantum technology is very useful, because you can trace these aspects and bring them back to the conscious. There is so much. And when we're experiencing an overwhelming sense of rejection, our emotions can be taking over. It can trigger us in our SSP, super soldier programming, or monarch programming. It can push us in dissociation, and we start distorting through our woundings what others are about. We start reducing their value, labeling them. It all starts to be really distorted. And everything becomes triggering. Everything about them, the person we feel rejected by, becomes triggering, and we're not able to witness and enjoy that person as they are. We just start to see them by the prism of distortion. And we have to realize when we're in these states that we are experiencing reality in a distorted way. Now, I don't think you can convince people to leave states of cognitive dissonance. Whoever wants to be there may stay there. And the majority of real sparks here are programmed to reject new pieces of information. They're programmed to hold on to their programming, and they are programmed to be using what they know for spiritual bypassing. Now, when we holding to this projection, we can feel that there are these toxic dynamics about justification, blame, attacks, building of new stories, right? The blame game is just getting old, especially if you see it being repeated in a relationship. And it's also about these phases of devaluation, which, this ties to narcissistic tendencies, which you have to work through your own if you want to resist being used as a handler in the life of other people. And MK Ultra has programmed layers of resistance and backdoor programming, and for beings to stay in these states of cognitive dissonance way longer than it could be if, MK Ultra was not involved in all of that. And it is really, the work is about accepting the level of darkness that has been programmed. It's not intrinsically ours. It's these aspects, these SSP aspects, these monarch programming aspects are challenging to experience when you are getting extremely triggered. And you can feel that this programmed darkness in you is not really you. And it takes time and years to understand what is all this like that you can experience, right? Every time I'm faced with something challenging, I notice how I've changed and evolved and worked on my patterns, and that's encouraging, right? And I'm working always on, working on not creating further polarization that reinforces the dynamic victim, perpetrator, or abuser, savior, just anything that would bring me back in that trauma triangle where it's extremely draining. It lacks maturity. It is full of MK Ultra programming. So a lot is being done for us to be caught in these bad loops. So we keep on externalizing. That's in the way for us to see where the work is really needed. And it's important to remember we are not these distorted images that are condescending, patronizing, demeaning from that handlers have about ourselves. And we are not the lies that they are spreading about us. And if your sense of self is strong enough, you rise to that place where what other people think don't matter. There can be moment in the day where you weaken, but I mean, generally, if you get to that place, that place where you know who you are, keeping on working on what you need to be working on, then, it saves you a lot of suffering that is unnecessary. And it's okay if you're the only one to know how people around you are being used and puppeted by, negative faction and so on. It's okay if you are the only one to know, but at least that's something that you know. And that can be enough. And that should be enough, truly. And just, mastering that art of not engaging with this intense puppeting, not entering in reaction mode. And when people act and react from their triggers, at least you know what you're really dealing with, because you only want to work with the ones who can master exactly this. That's exactly one of the most important things to be mastering. To have this ability right there is one of the best quality that you can find in relationships. It's not enough, to have this quality, because some beings have this quality, but they have no discernment, no memory. So they're really neutralized as beings. But that's an important quality that brings a sense of safety. You feel safe that you can have your boundaries, that you can be heard in your boundaries is very healing in a relationship. And it gives you the desire to share more even of yourself. Every time I'm not heard in my boundaries, I change something in the relationship and withdraw a little more, a little more. And the right place is always within, with true questioning and asking to spirit directly to reveal, what it is that we're not seeing or that we need to be seeing. Are we walking close to any lies to self or self-deceit that we need to be working on dismantling? Are there any sacrifice patterns that need deep excavation? And looking closer at our savior complex as well. MK Ultra has taught us to normalize the ongoing abuses in our lives. And sacrifice programming leads us to stay in abusive patterns way longer than necessary. Now, the wound of non-recognition is a trauma point, and so is our desire to help, or empathy. Our ability to have empathy is also being exploited very often here. And this wound of non-recognition comes from having psychologically been broken down. It's being used over and over again to reverberate back to us false matrix image about ourselves, where we feel completely cut from the greatness of who we know we are in essence. And when we are in that active wounding, we generally forget about all the possibilities we can open with our minds only. This is a wound, both the wound of non-recognition and the wound of rejection, that open us up to negative forms of attention. right? Because when we are made to feel unworthy, we begin to develop a craving for approval that is external, and that makes us easily manipulated. And the wound of non-recognition is generally really active for pretty much everybody here and can be deactivated layer after layer. But you always have these operations that target exactly that. This is one of the most triggering core wound. And that's one of the strongest point of dissociation as well. Right? And so you have to rise yourself high enough in the knowing of who you are. So, when these attacks come, they don't bring you down. And it takes a lot, I remember starting to work with the quantum app I work with, and my own panels that I've been writing about mind control and deprogramming. And this is really a technology that helps you to trace all the covered aspect in your life and assist you greatly in becoming more skilled at working with shadow aspect. Definitely it also helps you a lot with the gaslighting you're under, because you can trace which control energy is active and where does it come from. You can trace if it's coming from you or from another person. And when you have this as a proof, it really backs you up, and it's a great way to have this backup. And this is the only one that you need sometimes. You can see right through, is it me or is it not me? Or am I being, scapegoated? So there are certainly things that we need to be rejecting here. The infinite traps from the matrix, most of the backdrop technology, because they are not real relationships. They are oftentimes distraction, except when you need to or require the help and assistance of a backdrop, but just for really something really specific in your reality. Rejection of the suggested false realities around us, the cover stories, rejecting the MK Ultra aspects that others try to impose in your reality, that are very violating, that have handler programming in them. And beings who are able to work through their MK Ultra aspects are quite rare. And for that, you have to be skilled at working through ego layers as well, going beyond the ego. And part of the MK Ultra programming is to program beings to overlook shadow aspect, and so they never find how to work through them. So you have a lot of loops for years, false healing, and so on for eternity. I mean, that's what also the infinity symbol is about, things we can reject is also energy debating, the mimics of the imposters, group consensus and hive minds and group identities and artificially created timelines, rejecting what is unfairly projected onto us and walking away from abuse, rejecting intent that are meant to belittle and demean, We only need spirit to feedback to ourselves about the necessary steps we need to be addressing on our deprogramming journey. There are many suggestions that we can reject out of the field that are not playing in our high interest. And not accepting people coming at us with a control energy, because this control energy, they create a block, like you totally neutralize. And whenever you are blocked, you cannot shine the way you usually do. You cannot hold the space the way you would do if you were not like having this handling aspect coming at you. There is a lot we need to reject here in all the mirrors and projections. And the wound of non-recognition is where the love bombing and the flattery hooks in. And I mean, I like to radically do the work by addressing addictive patterns within me that, you know, can settle down in my reality. It's important to know our psychological and emotional weaknesses, and that our self-esteem is based on our vision of ourselves, not something exterior, because it can always be taken away from us. So it can be a lonely walk sometimes to keep on anchoring spirit free from these endling influences, or keeping them at bay at least. And what makes it extremely challenging here is this constant targeting of our self-esteem through a lot of simulation aspect, but also in our relationship with other original sparks here. And the way through these kinds of initiation is through integration and alchemization of our experiences each time. Some cannot be avoided, but you can always trace back where did it get out of hand, and where did I let others choose for myself, especially for the ones who are space holders. When you are the one to hold space somewhere, you need to be choosing the terms of pretty much everything and not to delegate, you know. So when will it be happening, on which terms, what is allowed in the space? Because MK Ultra aspecting other will always push the boundaries, and sometimes we are being forced to make it a little bit more clear in the beginning and letting people know what they are signing for. So we certainly need to keep on tracing in ourselves places where we are duping ourselves and fooling ourselves, and closing the entry points, because if the entry point is closed, then, you know, the darkness cannot really get in. And I think it's one of the most freeing journey here is to keep on working on freeing ourselves from the unconscious need of approval that comes from the exterior, and have a more steady sense of identity as it goes, and as you're going through the targeting operations of your self-esteem, and it really tries to demolish you sometime. And I think each operation assists us to become stronger in what we know we are. In keeping on building beautiful lives for ourselves. So working through whatever we need to be working through, where we are unhappy and not content, and where we feel it's a burden, whether it's the climate we are around or the things we are doing with our time, the things we are accepting to do for money, the amount of access we are accepting also for monetary compensation. Because in everything that exists, there is infiltration, gang stalking, targeting. It's not everyone and every day, but when you're going through the operation, it's just not so nice. So I keep on building for myself that stronger and stronger sense of self, in who I know I'm working to be here. And this despite dark MK Ultra aspect programmed in my consciousness, which I keep learning, because they are programmed reflexes as well. And you just need to catch yourself, catching yourself again and again until you deactivate all these reflexes that have been programmed, all these reactive behaviors, reactive, preprogrammed, predictable choices that only create drama and darkness. They're not really necessary here. And whenever there is no one around to co-create on a level that is genuine, then it is a moment to spend this time alone on, unfolding everything that needs to be unfolded here. And all the work also that we need to be putting as well.